This is NASA. They build rockets, telescopes, and batteries? Yeah, that's right. Of all the amazing NASA breakthroughs that have trickled down into our everyday lives, things like CAT scans, memory foam, and the insulin pump, none may be as game-changing as NASA's recent solid-state battery breakthrough. NASA's SABERS battery might actually have just pulled off the holy grail of battery tech, a high-powered solid-state battery that could electrify 90% of commercial aviation. So how does NASA's new battery change the game, and just how big a deal is it? Are solid-state batteries really the future of e-mobility? Let's figure this out together. I'm Ricky, and this is 2-Bit Da Vinci. This video is sponsored by Atmo. It may surprise you that NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Agency, would put money into battery research, but when you think about it, it makes sense. NASA makes things that fly, and the only way you can do that is by making them as light and powerful as possible so they can carry as much energy on board as possible and fly longer distances. This is so typical in engineering. There's always a trade-off. So NASA does research on engines and energy sources, trying to make them as energy dense and power dense as possible. And for most of NASA's history, that meant researching rocket engines, ice turbines, and rocket fuel. But with everything going electric, now that means batteries as well. Okay, so here's what we know about NASA's batteries so far. About 4 years ago, on October 1st, 2019, NASA launched the solid-state architecture batteries for enhanced rechargeability and safety, aka Project SABERS. I don't know who comes up with these names, but it's always a doozy. The plan was to develop solid-state batteries for commercial aviation and urban air mobility, basically electric planes, air taxis, and flying cars. The primary goal was to develop a battery that's safer, more efficient, more energy dense, and more resilient than conventional lithium-ion batteries. The SABERS battery uses a solid-state electrolyte instead of the typical liquid or gel electrolytes we see in lithium-ion batteries today, which is why it's called a solid-state battery. Let's do a quick rundown on how batteries in general work so you can understand what we're talking about here. Most batteries, like your typical lithium-ion cell in your phone or laptop, are made of 3 parts: a cathode, an anode, and an electrolyte sandwiched between the two. The anode active material is where all the energy is stored. When you use a battery to power a laptop, for example, the anode oxidizes and releases the electrons that move through the laptop circuits powering it. You can think of the cathode as a bucket that receives all those electrons once they make it out of the laptop because they have to go somewhere, right? Now, if this is the only thing that happened, we'd have a buildup of positive charge in the anode and negative charge in the cathode because all the negative electrons filling up in the bucket, and the reaction would quickly stop. And that's where the separator and electrolyte come in. The separator keeps the anode and cathode from short-circuiting, and it doesn't let electrons through, only the ions. The electrolyte in normal batteries is simply a salt dissolved in an organic solvent, which is flammable, and that's what causes the fires we've seen on so many of these YouTube videos in the past. In a solid electrolyte battery, the electrolyte is, well, solid. So you don't need to have liquid or gel that allows the ions to pass through. It can actually pass through from the electrolyte itself. This means much higher safety and potentially much better performance, but there's other challenges. One of the great pleasures of making these videos is all the research we get to do on really cool topics. For instance, we've done 2 videos on fires in Maui in Canada, and it's got me thinking about air quality in a whole new way. And I gotta tell you about our sponsor this week, Atmo, and this, the Atmo Tube Pro. This amazing little device is a game changer for understanding the air quality around you in real time. The Atmo Tube Pro detects a range of pollutants from volatile organic compounds, VOCs, like paint and gases, to particulate matter, PM1, PM2.5, and PM10, pollutants such as dust and pollen. And to get a perspective of just how small that is, here's what they look like compared to a grain of sand. It is so small and light, you can clip it to your belt or backpack and check air quality in real time wherever you go. It even measures temperature, humidity, and barometric pressure. I took it with me on a recent trip to the Fully Charged live show in Vancouver, and luckily air quality was good. But that data is powerful. With the Atmo 2 Pro, you can set personalized alerts for specific air quality standards and get notifications if the quality drops below those levels. What could be more important than protecting our families, the food we eat, the water we drink, and the air we breathe? Get up to 30% off the Atmo 2 Pro until September 23rd. Check it out today. Links in the description. Huge thanks to Atmo and you for supporting the show. The head of SABERS, Dr. Rocco Vigiano, and his team had a monumental task ahead of them. They needed to find the right electrolyte material and an anode-cathode combination that would perform better than lithium-ion batteries. So tall task. Then they had to design an electrolyte that would be easy and cheap to make at scale, one that wouldn't depend on rare materials and reach supply chain bottlenecks down the road, and one that would be safe to use both at ground level and at cruising altitudes. It was anything but easy, but they finally settled on the selenium sulfur chemistry. We'll discuss why in a moment. The team worked tirelessly for years, tweaking the composition, combining with other materials, and in October 2022, they finally published the results. We compared the SABERS battery to the best performing lithium-ion batteries, and this is what we found. The new SABERS battery has a specific energy density of 500 watt-hours per kilogram, which is almost twice that of the typical lithium-ion battery, making it around 40% lighter for the same amount of energy. 40% is a huge improvement. It means you can get the same amount of energy in roughly half the weight. So when we talk about energy density, there's two ways of doing it. Gravimetrical energy density, meaning weight, and then volumetric, meaning the amount of volume it takes up. Here's a really quick sidebar, okay? Hydrogen is amazing for energy density in terms of weight, right? Hydrogen is a gas. When you compress it, it has a ton of energy by weight, but it's really bad volumetrically. And that's because the vessels that you need take up a ton of space. So volumetric density for hydrogen, bad. Gravimetric, good. So for batteries, it's kind of the same thing. So how does the volumetric energy density for the SABERS battery compare? Really good, reaching over 800 watt-hours per liter. Lithium-ion cells only reach about 500 watt-hours per liter. This means SABERS batteries are also roughly 40% smaller than lithium-ion batteries in terms of volume. Picture your phone's battery being half the size and half the weight, but performing just as well. Or picture exactly the same battery pack in your EV, but giving you twice the range. Pretty cool, right? But the benefits don't stop there. You can drive a nail right through it, and it'll keep on working since there's no liquid that would drain out. There's also no flammable organic solvent to catch fire. So say goodbye to batteries that swell up and have thermal runaway reactions. Now this is crucial for airplanes. Lithium-ion batteries' optimal temperature range is between 59 F and 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Such a narrow range requires active thermal management, adding weight and complexity and reducing efficiency. SABERS operating temperature can go from 32 degrees Fahrenheit, around 0 degrees Celsius, to 302 degrees Fahrenheit, 150 degrees Celsius, which means it works safely and well in pretty much all flying conditions without a bulky and energy-intensive thermal management system. Okay, so let's put on our engineering hats for just a moment and dissect NASA's battery to see what makes it special compared to other solid-state batteries. And I promise it'll be really brief. The anode is simply made of metallic lithium. Now this is in contrast to most lithium-ion batteries that have graphite or silicon as the anode material. A pure lithium anode is about as good as it gets, so that's a really good start. The cathode is a bit more complex. It's made of a combination of sulfur, selenium sulfide compounds, and a patented porous graphene called holy graphene. They chose the lithium sulfur chemistry because it has a very high theoretical specific energy of 2,680 watt-hours per kilogram, which is almost 3 times that of lithium cobalt oxide batteries, which is approximately 980 watt-hours per kilogram. In theory, we should be able to store around 5 to 10 times the amount of energy in current lithium-ion batteries in a future SABERS battery of the same weight. Remember, more energy density is better for mobility like EVs and electric planes, not as critical for your phone, although if your phone lasted 2 days instead of 1, I'd take that. But sulfur alone is a bad ionic conductor. Adding selenium to the mix increases conductivity so we can get more power. But there's a trade-off because it lowers the energy density. So the team at NASA worked hard to optimize the ratio of the two to balance energy density and power density. Energy density is just how much energy it has. So if you have a 1 kilowatt hour battery, you can run 1 kilowatt for 1 hour. That's the energy. But that 1 kilowatt is how much power density it has. How high of an output could you put out in terms of current? So you need to have both in terms of high scale applications like aircraft. The holy graphene acts as a scaffold that does 2 things. It makes the cathode electrically conductive because graphene is a great conductor. And it lets us compress the cathode into a thin and stable layer without adding a polymer binder, which is typically used in every other solid-state cathode, making it heavier. But the key component of the whole system is the solid-state electrolyte. obviously. SABERS batteries use one of two lithium-rich solid electrolytes. LGPS, which is highly conductive and allows high-power batteries. The problem is that it has germanium, which costs 10 times more than silver because it's hard to extract. This makes this electrolyte expensive and possibly only viable for space missions where price isn't that important. And two, argordite, which is far cheaper, but it's also less conductive, so you get less power. These electrolytes exchange lithium ions moving through the crystal lattice from one electrode to the other. The best thing about this solid-state design is that it allows for something called bipolar stacking. Bipolar stacking means that we can stack cells back to back with both electrodes sandwiching the same current collector foil. This is important because it lets us connect the battery cells in series without external wiring and without individual housings for each cell. It's a little bit nerdy, but bear with us. We can do this with lithium-ion battery cells too, but it requires high-quality coating technology, accurate balancing, and advanced thermal management. This is why you see EV battery packs made in separate, individually housed cells that then have to be connected through external conductors welded onto the positive and negative electrodes. This has so many benefits. It reduces the weight and volume of the battery pack. It increases the system voltage. It also makes it easier to layer these cells in different geometries and possibly adapt to the shape or contour of an aircraft, for example. It's easy to see why Dr. Vigiano and his team at NASA are so excited about their breakthrough. The SABERS program has implications beyond the field of aviation. They could also benefit the electric vehicle industry, offering a safer and more efficient alternative to lithium-ion batteries. Air taxi services and commercial airlines could also benefit from these batteries due to their higher energy density and quick charging capabilities. We can also use them on space missions to power rovers and spacesuits and space stations and everything else. But after looking at the numbers, the one question on my mind is, can the SABERS battery realistically power a commercial jetliner and really help electrify long-haul air travel? And the answer will surprise you. We set out to find the specs of the most popular commercial aircraft in the world, the Boeing 737, in production since 1968 with a total of 10,877 units sold, to see what it would look like to replace its engines and fuel with electric motors and SABERS batteries. This is what we found in the latest model, the 737 MAX 7. So together, the 737's two engines and fuel, which we'd have to replace, weighs 57,760 pounds, and it produces a peak power output of 30 megawatts. Let's see how that would work out for our SABERS batteries. We consider the amount of fuel, its energy density, about 12,000 watt-hours per kilogram, and the efficiency of the LEAP engines, and the efficiency of the best electric motors and power transmission units we could find, to calculate the amount of energy we'd need to store in batteries for an equivalent performance. At SABERS' 500 watt-hours per kilogram rating, we'd need a mass of 188,000 kilograms. And that's not counting the motors. The best possible alternative for a high-power electric motor is MIT's prototype 1 megawatt electric motor, which weighs only 57.4 kilograms for a specific power of 17 kilowatts per kilogram. Remember, we need at least 30 megawatts of engine power for takeoff, which means 30 MIT engines weighing roughly 1,722 kilograms. So the weight of the system would be roughly 190,000 kilograms. That's 7 times the weight we are replacing and over twice the maximum takeoff weight. So realistically, the SABERS battery won't help us replace the popular 737 with an equivalent electric version. At least not with the same 4,000 miles of range. So no, we're not going to be doing trans-Pacific flights with the SABERS battery. But this doesn't mean it won't make a significant impact on the airline industry. We don't really need 4,000 nautical mile range most of the time. In fact, 90% of all passenger flights are less than 1,500 nautical miles. The largest proportion of flights are around 500 nautical miles long, so we could get away with reducing the range to 1/7 or approximately 550 nautical miles. This won't reduce the mass of the batteries to exactly 1/7, but it puts it well below the maximum takeoff weight. 500 nautical miles will get you from New York to the eastern border of Ohio, western Michigan, North Carolina, and to the tip of Maine. Or it could also get you from San Francisco to most of Oregon, Nevada, and parts of Arizona. So as it stands, combined with a suitable motor like the MIT 1 megawatt prototype, the SABERS battery could offer enough performance to electrify a very large portion of commercial flights, at least the shorter legs of them. In the meantime, it'll be great to see these batteries in EVs sooner than later. Just imagine a battery that's lighter, cheaper, holds more energy, and that will never catch fire even if you crash. But just when we're getting excited about this breakthrough battery tech, we started finding some major drawbacks as well. The solid-state battery's biggest enemy is power density. These batteries generally suffer from low charge and discharge rates, limiting the amount of power we can extract or put back in. And now this is a major problem for aircraft that need an immense amount of power for takeoff, and in the case of VTOLs, for hovering. It's like having a massive tank of water connected to a tiny hose when you need to put out a fire. You have all the capacity in the world, you just can't get it out fast enough. Researchers claim that the new battery has an overall 50-fold increase in power density compared to their earlier prototypes. But just how much power is that? NASA doesn't say, or at least we couldn't find that particular piece of data. And it kind of raises a red flag, right? But we wouldn't be too big Da Vinci if we didn't at least try to come up with an educated guess. Based on NASA's data, we know that the SABERS battery can charge at a rate of at least 1 C. This means that it would be fully charged from 0 to 100% in 1 hour. This puts the SABERS specific power density at 500 watts per kilogram. For comparison, a Tesla 4680 cell, which weighs 355 grams and holds about 97 watt-hours of energy, can be charged and discharged in about 15 minutes, a rate of 4 C. This means that it has a specific power density of approximately 1100 watt-hours per kilogram, over twice that of the SABERS battery. So SABERS has roughly half the power density of one of the best lithium-ion batteries in the market, which is nothing to scoff at, considering that most older solid-state batteries had much less than 1/10 of that power. Another major drawback of the sulfur selenium battery chemistry is something called polysulfide shuttling, which reduces cycle life significantly. This happens when the sulfur in the cathode moves or shuttles through the electrolyte and to the anode. A solid electrolyte is supposed to avoid this completely, but I found at least one published paper where the authors prove that it can still happen even with solid electrolytes. Now this can limit the cycle life of the SABERS battery to only a couple hundred cycles. That means charge and discharge only a couple hundred times. Low cycle life means the battery dies sooner and you have to replace it more frequently, adding more maintenance and downtime costs. Now these extra costs are a huge problem, especially in the airline industry that already operates with super tight margins of as little as 1 to 2%. If NASA doesn't get this fixed, I doubt any aircraft manufacturer would take this seriously and build electric jets anytime soon. And if they do, I doubt any airline would buy it. There is a silver lining though, because NASA isn't the only one developing solid-state batteries. Toyota, the world's biggest car manufacturer by volume, unveiled the development of a next-gen solid-state battery that will hit the commercial scale and market by 2025. Toyota claims the battery can add 745 miles of range to their future EVs and charge fully in 10 minutes at a rate of 6 C, which is kind of nuts. However, they didn't give any specific details about it, so we'll have to wait and see. They plan to integrate it into their lineup of hybrids and plug-in hybrids by 2025 and into their all-electric vehicles by as early as 2026. Now that's just 3 years away, and we'll see, because they've dragged their feet until now, always with this promise of a future EV with solid-state batteries. But time will tell. Several other companies like Nissan are also working on solid-state batteries, but the most promising, in my opinion, is Lyten, which is setting itself up to mass produce a lithium-sulfur solid-state battery very similar to NASA's SABERS concept. This battery is the brainchild of Lyten's chief battery technology officer, Selena Mikolajczyk, who is famous for developing batteries for Tesla while the company launched the Model S, Model X, Model 3 Powerwall, and PowerPack products. She then joined Uber as director of battery engineering and then went on to Panasonic Energy, which produces batteries for Tesla, and she later joined QuantumScape, another solid-state battery player. Except for Tesla, where she worked for 6 years, she's been jumping from company to company every year and a half, give or take. Now she works at Lyten. Lyten claims at maturity, their battery will have an energy density of 600 watt-hours per kilogram and 800 watt-hours per liter and costs less than $60 a kilowatt hour. That's almost a third of today's average lithium-ion battery prices at the pack level, which costs $151 per kilowatt hour. We'll have to wait and see if they live up to their claims or if Selena leaves before that happens. She's already been there for a year and a half, so who knows? Anyways, this is one of those things that everybody is trying to develop, and there's a reason. There's so much promise behind the lithium-ion battery, especially when you remove the electrolyte and go solid state. Now, aviation still is a bit of a stretch, admittedly, but imagine a car that goes twice as far, right? With the same pack and everything else. Now, if we can get the economics and the prices down, the safety, reliability, longevity all together, this is one of those home run things. This is one of those watershed moments, and it's why everybody's working on it. I'm so relieved and so happy to know that NASA is one of them. So what did you think? How excited are you about solid-state batteries, and how important is NASA in this game? As we mentioned in the beginning of the video, there are a ton of things in our lives that NASA is responsible for. All right, so if you thought that was cool, check out this video next. And until next week, I'm Rico Da Vinci. Thank you so much for watching.